Braktayawa, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rachakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is The Wisdom of a Learned Man. And pretty much this lesson came from an inspiration of a video I was watching. The elder Karataza out of the Vegas camp. He did a lesson called It's All Starting to Come Together. You're Being Found Out. Salakia. And he was going in on vocab and, a lot of different points on, Amalek, these small hats, things that they do. When they do the things that we do or say, it's okay. But when we do it, it's not okay. But that's not the focus on this lesson. The focus on this lesson is based off of a word that the elder used in this lesson. And the word is erudite. Now, I've heard the word before a few times. I never looked it up. So I ended up finally looking it up. And it pretty much means a person that's pretty much like extremely learned. And it made me start thinking about different scriptures. It made me start thinking about, different things. So what I did was I looked the word up, erudite, in the Etam online, and it's a compound word. And pretty much when you break the word down, the first part of it, the E, goes back to the word X, which means out. And rudite goes back to the word rude, which means unlearned. So the word erudite or learned man or someone that's extremely learned is someone that's brought out of that unlearned, situation. All right. So the word literally means out of the rude or out of, being unlearned, and that's how one becomes extremely learned when you look the word up. Because like the Apostle Paul said, though I be rude in speech, yet not in knowledge, because the Apostle Paul was not an eloquent speaker. He was very rude and rough, when he spoke. But nevertheless, the knowledge that he spoke and the things that he spoke were very learned. The words of a very learned man, although they weren't coming out like these $50,000 words. That's why he even said that when he came to you, I didn't come to you with excellency of speech, of man's wisdom. He came as it was with the knowledge of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, and the knowledge of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai is plain. So, you know what? Let's just look this word up real quick. We'll go to the Etam online just so you can see. So you can get an idea. It says early 15th century, learned but instructed. So a scholar would be considered, a learned man in this society. They would be considered a erudite. From Latin eruditus, learned, but they're pretty much wise fools because they have knowledge and wisdom of a lot of points and a lot of key guess for lack of better words, points in history, but they lack the spirituality of the scriptures because everything to them has to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Empirical. Like in other words, they don't deal with faith. They just deal with, things that they can see and prove. They don't deal with faith at all. Everything that they deal with is just strictly on, okay, can it be proven or not? And some things are in the spirit. Some things are based off of faith. Our faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Yahushai dying on the cross, to Yahushai being buried in the sepulcher, to Yahushai being raised from the dead, to Yahushai teaching his disciples for a period of time before he went back to the Father, to Yahushai ascending up into a chariot to be taken before the Father, to Yahushai sitting on the right hand of the Most High, Yahweh in the heavens, all, to Yahushai being given all power and dominion over every spirit ever created except for the Most High. These are all things that we've never seen with these bodily eyes. But based off of faith, we believe it. So not everything that you read in the Bible can be proven, you know, can be proven, you know, with empirical evidence. And that's why in the book of, you know, Hebrews, let's get that real quick. No, just this is a basic fundamental building block scripture, but for those, you know, brothers, sincere brothers out there, and you know, very few sisters that may be new to this, Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, because faith is a belief. You know, it's not something that you hold tangibly in your hand. It's not something that you can go and order, you know, at a store, a pound of or an ounce of, or whatever the case may be. It's something that's not seen. It's a feeling that you have, a conviction that you have. That's the substance. It says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So the faith that we have is the evidence that these things actually happened. All right, because faith is belief. But the faith that we have, some may call it blind faith, you know, because no one in this society today, you know, I'm saying that as people today here, has seen Yahushua being crucified on the cross, you know, being taken down, being put in a sepulcher, you know, resurrecting. We didn't see that in this time. But through the Spirit of the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Shai, He has given us the conviction to believe that. So these erudites or these scholars that believe in these things, that are considered learned men, they lack faith. And that's why the Apostle Paul said that, you know, you have these individuals that are carnal, and the carnal mind cannot receive the things of the Spirit. And we know that without faith, it's impossible to please the Most High, and that the carnal mind is enmity with the Most High, or an enemy to the Most High. So it says, going back to erudite, from Latin eruditus, learned, accomplished, well informed. And that's what these so-called scholars are. They're well informed, but they're not spiritual. All right, past, and then same thing with a lot of these Christians. And we're not talking about your average Christian in the church that goes to church on Sundays, goes to the catfish fries and all that, all that stupid bullshit that sing praise and hop up and down in the church. You know, now we ain't talking about that. We're talking about the guys that have actually gone to college, have actually learned, have actually know, you know, how to go into the Greek and the Hebrew and navigate through the scriptures, even though they don't have the spiritual understanding of the Bible. Their understanding of the scriptures and the so-called qualifications that they have with these accolades or these certificates that they receive, you know, is based off of the Christian worldview that pretty much is pushed through the Renaissance, you know, Christianity, as Elder Apostle Tahar coined it. It says of erudere, to educate. See, so another word for erudite is educated, teach, instruct, polish. See, because when you first learn, you're rough around the edges, and the things that you learn after a while of being put into use, you become polished at it, because you become used to it. You gain experience. The word experience, X is out, peritas is to try. So experience means someone that has been tried out. And how do you become tried out? By going through different, you know, so-called hurdles, you know, and going through different um, experiences, dealing with, you know, whatever subject or topic you're dealing with. And you know, in the long run, you know, the more you practice in that teaching or in that, you know, learning, the better you become at it, you know. It says Hebrews 5:12, for when for the time you ought to be teachers, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of the Most High, because the first principles or the milk of the scriptures is what helps build you up to become a spiritual man, to leave the babe stage and to come into the stage of adulthood. But it's a process. And in that process, you're going to go through your trials and tribulations. You're going to be tried, and those trials pretty much start to, hack away at those impurities, that we had in the past, and become to make us more and more polished. Like Elder Pastor uses the analogy of, we pretty much are at the stage now of being analytical. We're analyzing things. We're not just teaching and going and breaking this scripture down and that scripture down. We're analyzing what a lot of these individuals are saying and pretty much breaking it down. And that's another way that the scriptures called casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of the Most High. Because a lot of these individuals, to the untrained and unlearned mind, they sound good because they can put words together. They know how to go and navigate through the scriptures. But really, when you deeply scrutinize what they're really saying and what the scriptures are saying, it doesn't add up. You see? And are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat, right? Because you have to first suck the breast of the milk of the scriptures so that you can grow and then be able to eat the strong meat. And that's the process. It's called discipline. And discipline goes into the word disciple. A disciple is a student. A student has a master. The word master goes back to maestro in Spanish, which means teacher. All right. So a master or maestro or a teacher is one that's skillful in learning. Like the Apostle Paul was a master builder because he knew the ins and outs of everything there was to know about the truth. So he was a master builder. So he was a master teacher, so you could understand. So he was on the level to deal with strong meat. But even in certain cases, he wouldn't use. There was things that he wanted to speak to them about. The flock that he was teaching, but he couldn't because they were still in that carnal stage. Yahushua, before he was crucified, he said, "I have many things to tell you of, but you're not able to bear them now." Why? Because they were still in that babe stage. So it says, for everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe, right? But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, right? Meaning they came to the age of perfection. Even those who by reason of what use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So they actually went through the process of that training, through the discipline, through the trials and the tribulations, through the ups and downs, through the battles of dealing with these different teachings out here, and are able to dissect the scriptures and go into the scriptures and break down the lies that these individuals are teaching. So going back, right, to a erudite, right, instruct, polish, literally to bring out of the rough, right, because that's where the word rudite goes to, the word rude or rough. So you could have something that's very precious, but it could be in the rough, and you have to bring it out of there. You have to polish it. So the word erudite from assimilated form of X, out. So it's out, out, ruddis, unskilled, rough, unlearned. So to take out of the realm of the unlearned and to bring them into the realm of the extremely learned. But that's a road. It's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. And you have those that want instant gratification. It doesn't come like that. There's a lot of toil and labor. You brothers know out there that are coming to the stage of being polished, and being very skillful in the word. You know that road and how hard it was to get to where you're at now. You know, it took a lot of, labor, a lot of discipline, a lot of tedious, research to get to the point where you're at right now. So you're in essence a spiritual erudite. You have carnal erudites, you have spiritual erudites. You see? And the brothers that are in the truth are spiritual erudites or spiritual learned men. And what this brought to mind also was the name Enos, and also, which we're just going to go straight to the main one, and the name Enoch. Now, when you deal with the name Enoch, you have to remember that you have two Enochs. You have Enoch that, that came from the line of the wicked, or the line of Cain. But then you also had the Enoch that came to the line of Shem. All right, from Adam all the way down. I'm sorry, not Shem. From Adam all the way down. Adam, Seth, Enos, all the way down. All the way down to Enoch. All right. Now, when you look up this word Enoch, right, or this name Enoch, because names have meanings. Elder Apostle Gabar always speaks about something called nomen omen, name prediction. So your name predicted, what you would do in the future. So the word for Enoch is the word chanak, right? And the word chanak, it says here dedicated, which is good, because in order to be a learned man, you have to be dedicated. You have to have discipline. So what we have to do is go to the root word of chanawak. Should I say salak? It was chanawak. Let's go back to that. Enoch is chanawak, that goes to the word chanak. Salakia for that, right? And the word chanak means to train, dedicate, inaugurate, to train up. So how do you train? Scriptures say, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. So training up means to subject yourself to a discipline, to be able to, become a professional in your craft. Okay? So let's go from there. But there's a process to it. So let's go to the book of 2 Timothy. This is pretty much a basic lesson. This is, for more so for the beginners. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, it says, study to show thyself approved unto the Most High, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Because you have these Christians that are considered to be learned, that have their credentials, that in this world they're qualified to teach what they teach, but it's skewed. It's not perfect, because it's based off of I'm trying to get a word, I guess for lack of better words, it's prejudiced. And when I mean prejudice, meaning it's prejudged, by the training that they received, but it's not biblical. See, they use the Bible, but it's not biblical. Remember, the Apostle Paul mentioned about those that teach another gospel, but he said it's not another gospel, but there be some that trouble you, because they're using the same words in the Bible, but they're coming with a different point of view. They're coming with a different interpretation. There's no interpretation other than what the scriptures and what the Lord intended it to be. Now, I'm not sure if I was listening to a video earlier or a thought came to mind, and I was listening to something. I just can't remember what it was, dealing with believe it was something on Instagram, dealing with the serpent and Eve, and I started to think about what Yahushua said to the wicked Pharisees and Sadducees, because what the serpent did was he told some truths, but he also told lies. And what he did was he threw the ball in Eve's court, to see what she would say. because that was his way of luring her in, and he was able to trap her that way. He couldn't do that to Adam. And that's the same thing that the wicked Pharisees and Sadducees were doing. They were trying to trap the people that were going toward in the right direction back into the traditions of men, which is pretty much what's being done today, with some of these false Israelites, and also with these churches, these so-called learned individuals in these churches. All right. But that's another lesson. If Spirit allows, I can go into something like that if the Spirit allows. So now when we look up this word study, this is a heavy word here, and we're going to go through a few of these root word etymologies all the way back to all the way back into time. So the word there is spudazzo, right? Now spudazzo, that's where you get the word speed, to hasten, make haste, to exert oneself, endeavor, give diligence. So you give diligence and you exert yourself so that you can receive, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, because it's a discipline that not very many are willing to subject themselves to, and to be diligent means you have to put aside a lot of things. You have to be able to focus without being easily distracted. So it goes back to the root word spude, right? Spude, haste, with haste, right? Earnestness, diligence, earnestness in accomplishing, promoting, or striving after anything. All right. So it's a discipline. Now, right. So let's go right. And it says to give all diligence, interest oneself most earnestly. Right. So this is why Yahweh Shai said, if thy eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. You see, because you can't serve two masters in this truth. You're going to either hate the one or love the other. You're going to spend more time in devotion to one than you are to the other. You're either going to serve the Lord or you're going to serve money. And that's the only two options. If you're serving a woman, or you're serving Esau, or you're serving anything else, you're serving money. All right. So it goes back to another root word, spudo. Right? Spudo. It says to hasten, make haste, to desire earnestly. But this is what I really want to get to. The word pus. And get your mind out the gutter. Pus, a foot, both of men or beast. Often in the Orient, one put his foot on vanquished, means to conquer. Yeah, because in anything you do, if you want to conquer it, you have to show the discipline first and then apply yourself to accomplish that mission. Understanding the mission, studying the mission, learning the mission, and accomplishing the mission. That's how you conquer it, right? It says, of disciples listening to their teachers' instruction are said to be at his feet. To be at his feet, okay? And that was very interesting to me. Now, let's build off of that. All right. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus. This is in Apocrypha, chapter 6. We're going to read a few verses in here. We're going to jump to a couple of other verses. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus chapter 6 and verse 18. Let's start at 18. My son, gather instruction from thy youth up. Train up a child in the way he should go. So this is a part of the discipline. So shalt thou find wisdom till thine old age. Because the scriptures speak about the hoary head is to be had in honor if it be found in righteousness. Because you have a bunch of old fools out here. Even to this very day, we came across one last night at the camp. This old ass fool. I mean, talking about this dude was older than all of us, coming up with that same old tired bullshit. And beginning with Elder Yashawamba. He was in the spirit. He's like, he wasn't in the plain mode. The spirit was heavy upon him, and the spirit, jumped from him, jumped to Elder Ariala, because Elder Yashawamba was cursing individuals out there last night in the spirit. Then the spirit jumped on Elder Ariala. He cursed him out, and then the spirit jumped on Elder Apostle Rakah, and he was cursing him out. You see, and the dude was an old fool. So you're gonna have that. So he's not, he's an old bottle. He's not going to receive this knowledge. There's nothing you could do. So our whole hope is for these people to leave. And it seemed like damn near every demon that passed through there, because we had to, move because, the weather wasn't the greatest yesterday, but the spirit held the rain back. So they, the elders went to a spot. That's why we got started kind of late, because we had to find them. They went to a spot, that had like something over so that, it could block the rain in case it rained. But anyway, damn near every demon, and then you have robot, Uber shits passing by trying to knock the tripod down. It was just a demonic night, and that old fool came up and he got a tongue lashing. So he's not ready for this. Says, come unto her as one that ploweth and soweth, right? Because it's a labor, but it's a labor of love. If you love to do it, then you're going to prosper. But if you hate to do it, you're not going to hang on to this. And walk for and wait for her good fruits, right? Because nothing good comes easy. You have to work at it. If anything comes too easy, it doesn't normally last, and it's normally not good. For thou shalt not toil much in laboring about her, right? Because once you apply yourself into that discipline, you're going to start to see the benefits. And the greatest thing about it is other people will see the benefits of it in you. Even things you may not see in yourself. But thou shalt eat of her fruits right soon, see? And that's where all of the knowledge and the wisdom comes out when you're speaking, when you're doing lessons, all of the information, the Lord starts drawing it back out. That's why Yahushua said, don't worry about what you're going to speak about. For it's not you that speak, but the spirit of your heavenly Father. That's why it says, study to show thyself approved unto the Most High. Because he's the one that's going to put his spirit through his son Yahushua in us to be able to speak these things that we've learned over time. She is very unpleasant to the unlearned. See, she is very unpleasant unto the unlearned, to the rude, to the ones that are not erudites, to the ones that are not interested in becoming erudites, to the ones that are not interested in learning, the ones that are not interested in discipline, to the ones that are in that, Epicurean mindset. The Epicurean mindset is not going to get you the wisdom of the learned. The Epicurean mindset is just going to get you destroyed, break your body down. It's called a decadent lifestyle. Decadent goes back to the word decay. It's a lifestyle that decays your body over time. That's why you have these rappers that'll come out, just using them as examples, and they'll talk about drinking this and smoking that. But after a while, when they start getting sick, they start turning their life around. They start changing their lifestyle. They don't live that same lifestyle, even though they still sing about it or rap about it. You see, that's why you see, here it is, you got the Locks, right? They're supposed to be this hardcore group, D Block and all this, right? You got dudes that's vegetarians, eating plant-based foods, and I'm sure they ain't drinking that bullshit liquor. If they drink, they probably drink some really high-end stuff, and they don't abuse it like they used to. You see what I'm saying? But to the masses out there, they still push that, drink this and drink that, but some of them, they'll go and tell Jake to, to change their lifestyle, to change their diet, change what they do, change the smoking habits and all of that. But for the most part, they'll. I'm just using the locks as an example. I don't know everything that they do, but you have those that push that lifestyle because that's the way they make their money. Like these other hoes, they'll push the lifestyle of not having a man, but then they have a family. They have a man. They have children. They have a good home. But then they're pushing to these stupid hoes out here to be single, to be a demon, to be a slut, to be a hoe. But that's another topic. Verse 20, she is very unpleasant to the unlearned, right? Because they're not willing to subject themselves to that discipline because they don't care for learning. It says, he that is without understanding will not remain with her. See, because she's going to take you to rough patches. She will lie upon him as a mighty stone of trial, and he will cast her from him ere it be long. And that's why, Yahweh Shai said, he that endureth to the end, the same shall be saved. Because it's a rough road, and it gets tough. It gets rough. But, in certain individuals, certain Israelites, they have a mechanism in them that no matter how hard it gets, and no matter what, even though they want to give up, or some days they'll be like, the hell with that, there's always something in them that keeps burning, like in Jeremiah, to keep coming back and to keep disciplining themselves to it, and to become better and better and better. It says, for wisdom is according to her name, and she is not manifest unto many. There's not many that's going to be able to attain the true wisdom of the scriptures. Give ear, my son, receive. Now you have those that will give their discipline to learning, but discipline to learning the wrong things. Like these, apologists, these different Christian so-called scholars. I'm dealing with Jake. I'm not dealing with Esau. Fuck Esau. Fuck the other nations. I'm talking about Israelites that are in that mindset. They love to learn, but they just love to learn the wrong things. And the reason why is because it wasn't given to them to want to learn about this. Because a lot of these guys that are coming up against us and then coming up against this truth, they were the same ones that were coming up against the truth back then. It says, give ear, my son, receive my advice, and refuse not my counsel, and put thy feet into her fetters and thy neck into her chain, meaning into her discipline. Bow down thy shoulder, right? Bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds. Because these bonds it's like when you're training. The bonds would be like the burning, the going through the workouts, and that burning sensation that makes you want to give up, that muscle failure, and different things like that make you want to give up and say, the hell with this. But when you finish and then you see the results later, it makes you want to go harder. All right. So now let's go from there. We're going to come back to this. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Right? This is the book of Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11. It says, now no chastening, which is what? Discipline, trials or tribulations, the burning part, the purging process. It says, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous, right? Because it's hard to bear sometimes. Sometimes you don't want to know nothing about nothing. But, this is a part of that walk. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you'll be able to, or the sooner you can wrap your mind around that, the sooner you'll be able to discipline yourself more if you are part of the elect. Because if you're not, then you're not going to last anyway. It says, but grievous, nevertheless, afterwards, after you discipline yourself to go through these things, or after you go through this chastening, it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. See? So that's when you start to get the benefits. You can wish for it all day, But if you don't apply, you're not going to get, you're not going to achieve. Belief without application, is you're not going to achieve nothing. That's why, Apostle James said, faith without works is dead. You can have the belief, but if you ain't willing to put, the work in, then, is vain. So the word for exercise is gymnazo, which goes back to the word gymnos, which pretty much means naked, right? It says to exercise naked in a palestra or school of athletics, to exercise vigorously in any way, either the body or the mind. In the case that we're dealing with is we're dealing with the mind, and when you go through those exercises, that's what builds it, and you deal with the discipline, that's when you get the results. That's when the big bucks come in, this inside joke. All right, let's go back to Ecclesiasticus chapter 6 and verse 26. Come unto her with thy whole heart. Right, you have to be your mind has to be single. You can't have half yourself in the truth and half yourself in the world. It's not going to work. And keep her ways with all thy power. Right. So when you get this knowledge, hold on to her with all your might. Search and seek, and she shall be made known unto you. Right. Let's hold on to that. We're going to come right back. Excuse me. Let's go to St. John chapter 5. And verse 39. It says, search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. And Yahushua said, learn of me, for I am meek. So Yahushua gave us the ultimate supreme example of how to be. He didn't seek any reputation. He didn't seek to exalt himself. His whole mindset was to exalt the Father. Our whole mindset is to exalt Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. All right? Oh, that's heavy. Search the scriptures, graphos, which is our writings. Search the writings. So let's go to, what was I going to look up here? I guess search. Let's see what the word for search on this one says. Search. Now. You now. You now. It says to search, examine into, right? Investigate, pretty much. See? Investigate. And when you investigate, is you're looking into it. Matter of fact, let's look at the word investigate. Investigate. Back formation from investigation, or else from Latin investigatus, past participle of investigare, to trace out, search after, search into. Right. So when you have a detective and they're doing an investigation, they're looking into every little bit of evidence that they have to build their case, to be able to either prove or disprove that this particular person or these particular people committed this crime or not. From in, which is in or into, vestigare, to track. So in tracking, or to track in, trace, basically to trace out, the evidence that will make this person guilty. So, or free them. So the word for search, erudite, is to search, examine through, or investigate, to search into it or to track down. Okay. And that's how you learn. So let's go back to Ecclesiasticus 6, and let's read that verse again, 27. Search and seek, and she shall be made known unto thee. And when thou hast got hold of her, let her not go. For at the last thou shalt find rest, right? Because you're going to yield the peaceable fruits of righteousness because you were able to deal with her discipline. Remember, she has to take us through rough ways. It says, and that shall be turned to thy joy. It says, then shall her fetters be a strong defense for thee, right? And her chains a robe of glory. Yeah, that discipline. For there is a golden ornament upon her, and her bands are purple lace, right? Because before we got to the camp, Elder Apostle Rakal was doing a video, in the truck on our way to camp, and we were going into it, and he was speaking about the crown. Looked up the word for crown. Pretty much it's to receive a reward, for completing a particular mission. And that's what this is. Studying to get this wisdom, to receive this wisdom, to receive a reward at the end. But it's all a discipline. And it's funny because when we got to the camp, eventually the elders were speaking about the same thing about the crown, but just in a different way. So it was all spiritual. It says, thou shalt put her on as a robe of honor, and shall put her about thee as a crown of joy, right? And that's when the Lord can use you, because prior to you becoming a vessel to where the Spirit can just deal with you directly, you have to submit yourself to the discipline or be at the feet of the teacher that's teaching you, right? And that was Poos, right? Yep, I'm going to hold on to that because we're going to get back to that. My son, if thou wilt, thou shalt be taught. And if thou wilt apply thy mind, thou shalt be prudent or wise or a erudite. Learned, trained man. Chanawak, chanak. All right. Let's go from there to Proverbs. Chapter 1 and verse 2. It says, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. So how do you get that? Well, first of all, it has to be, first of all, the Most High Yahweh has to draw you, which means if he draws you, more than likely you're part of the elect, because you definitely have to be a part of the elect. Yahweh has to draw you to Yahweh Shai, and he has to draw you to the right teachers. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity, right? Because these are all things that are needed in order to be a perfect judge. To give subtlety to the simple, because we were all simple at one time, and we lacked a lot of these traits. But the Lord gave us some of them. Some of us may have had certain traits, but the Lord polished them while we were going through this walk, and while we're going through this walk. To the young man, knowledge and discretion, right? Because if you have discretion, if you are wise, if you've been experiencing certain things, you're not going to be quick to react. You're going to think first and then execute afterwards. Like you had these hyenas come up to the camp. What they talking about? And really, we didn't want to deal with them. And I said, the Bible. Are they talking about Jesus? I said, yeah. And she turned to the other hyenas. Oh, they talking about Jesus. Okay, amen. And then they walked down the street. I was very short because I really didn't want to talk to them, because you already know that they was just there for attention, But that comes through what? Through discipline. That comes through experience, That comes through discretion. Back in the days, you would engage. You were, hey, sister, you could already tell. You had this one guy that came up. He just stood there. What camp are you guys from? I really didn't really feel like talking to him. But I said, you know what? I said, we GMS. He said, oh man, that's where I learned from. I said, okay, brother, keep on learning. All right. Keep on learning. Hey, I learn. I take my notes, you know. And so you guys are here? I said, yeah. He said, you'll be here tomorrow? I said, no, I'm usually here on Fridays. Any other day? I said, yeah, sometimes Tuesdays. You know, okay. And then after that, he just disappeared. So show you that he really wasn't about the truth. Because if he was about the truth, whatever other plans he had, he would have put him to the side, you know, and learned. But that all comes through discretion, you know, because I could tell he was full of shit, but at the same time, you know, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, especially when he said you learn from jail. I said, all right, well, let's see. You know, in my mind, I didn't say that to him. So it says, a wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. See, this doesn't come overnight. I believe what's that in Ecclesiasticus? Um, how does it go? The understanding of a proverb is I can't think of the exact wording. Something that is along the lines of basically it's tedious, a tedious road. I can't think of the wording right now. I know you brothers know what I'm talking about. You know, in order to understand the prophecy, it's it's like I can't think of the same, but I'm pretty sure you brothers know what I'm talking about. Salakia. Verse 7, the fear of the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is the beginning of knowledge, and that's the problem with a lot of jakes. Outside the truth and in the truth, they don't have the fear of the Lord. That's the beginning of knowledge. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. Yeah, and that's why you won't have many that come into this, because the majority of Jake are in that Epicurean mindset. My son, hear the instruction of thy father. Instruction, which is one thing that Jake does not like to have. Jake is just a wild bull in the net, wild beast. They don't like discipline. They don't like instruction. They just like pleasure, riot. And forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, right? A crown, and chains about thy neck, right? Where you be able to wear them proudly. So let's go back to 2nd Ezra 6 and 33. Almost done. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. 6 and 33. All right. It says, if thou love to hear, thou shalt receive understanding. You know what? Before we go here, let me go. We're going to come back to this. Let me go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to get this one real quick. Chapter 25 looks like. And verse 5. Oh, how comely is the wisdom of old men, and understanding and counsel to men of honor, right? And that's if they be found in righteousness. Much experience is the crown of old men, see? And the fear of the Most High is their glory, right? And there's a discipline that comes with it. All right, now let's go back. 2nd Ezra 6:33. If thou love to hear, thou shalt receive understanding, and if thou bow thine ear, thou shalt be wise. Stand in the multitude of the elders, and cleave unto him that is wise, right? Be willing to hear every godly discourse, and let not the parables of understanding escape thee. And if thou seest a man of understanding, get thee betimes unto him, and let thy foot wear the steps of his door. And that's why I wanted to go to that, because the word spudazo, which means study, when you go all the way back to the last root of it, which is pus, right? It means of disciples listening to their teacher's instruction are said to be at his feet. And this is how you become a erudite or a learned man. And as we have here. Erudite. Ex out rudis, rude, unskilled, unlearned. So how do you come out of listening to your teachers and hearing and being instructed? You know, let's go back there. So of disciples having of disciples listening to their teachers' instruction are said to be at his feet. So let's go back here, read this again. 2 Ezra 6:36, and if thou seest a man of understanding, get thee betimes unto him, and let thy foot wear the steps of his door. Right, so you will be at his feet to learn. Just like does it say it like that? Let me see something. At the I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yep, Acts 22:3. I am verily a man which am a Jew. This is the Apostle Paul, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. So he sat at the feet of Gamaliel. So he was a disciple of Gamaliel's. He was disciplined under Gamaliel. You know, he became a erudite under the feet of Gamaliel, waiting at the feet of Gamaliel. All right, let's see what it says at the feet. Okay, it's just going to give you. Oh, there you go. Feet, pus. See, that's the same word for study. The last, that's heavy. The last, right there, pus, at para. All right, and it's the same word we just read, which was the last root word of spudazzo, pus. See, of disciples listening to their teachers' instruction are said to be at his feet. See, so the Apostle Paul was brought up at the feet of Gamaliel. That's heavy, man. Thoughts to mind. Okay, so so pretty much that is the road to becoming a erudite or a very learned individual. Now, the so-called Christians, these scholars and all that, they are erudites in worldview Christian, world Christian view. But we are erudites in the spirit of Yahweh B'Shem Al Shai that were not taught by man like that. As I'm saying, as far as men of so-called qualifications in this world, certificates and all that. We were taught by our teachers, which were taught by their teachers, and none of us went to any college or so-called higher school of learning to learn the knowledge that we have. We learned it through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Al Shai from the teachers before us. So we sat at their feet until we were able to come to that status, and we're still learning every day. Every day we learn more and more. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. To the next time I say shalom. See something. It's not the Discord. Yep. Elders, for they also learned of their Father beautiful, and of them thou shalt learn understanding, and to give answer as need requires. Wow, that's heavy. Beautiful, beautiful. That is prosperity and finding of. Oh, here we go. Yeah, the water, bro. I knew somebody was gonna bring it out. The elder Mathathia, Ecclesiastes 13:26. A cheerful countenance is a token of a heart that is in prosperity, and the finding out of parables is a wearisome labor of the mind. Yeah, the water, brother, the water. Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful. All right, so with that, like I said, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say shalom.